Cutback for Vasilev, and Lukic! A banger of a strike for Jovan Lukic's first MLS goal!
It's fallen out to Westfield! Oh, wow! He's nearly taken the roof of the net off! Philadelphia pounce again!
Who gets his goal on his Union debut? The record signing, off and running in his first appearance for the club. Hello and welcome to the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd, and man, back-to-back podcasts, 2 days. Like I said, maybe some of you guys listening to the RSS feed, and now you guys get 2 podcasts in one day. And this is definitely unusual for us to have back-to-back podcasts scheduled, but we had made it a point to you guys that we want to try to get more guests onto the show to help us preview upcoming matches. And it all started a couple weeks ago, and it's continuing here. And yeah, we appreciate all the feedback from you guys saying, hey, get more people on. We enjoy these episodes. And so that's exactly what we did. But yeah, this is a good feeling to me because it happened with Jess Sharman a couple weeks ago when she was on the podcast back in 2022. Today's guest, he was on the show a couple times, probably around the same time as Jess was on the show. And so it's so cool to revisit and rekindle with these people that used to come back on. I know last week when Nate Bukaty and Devin Kerr called the match in Philadelphia, finally got to meet Devin in person after being a guest on the show. And yeah, Jose and I definitely want to get Devin on the podcast at some point this season. But today's guest, no stranger to the show. He is the radio voice for the Columbus Crew, Chris Doran. Chris, how you doing?
I'm great, Todd. Thanks. Good to be back with you on the show, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's such a great feeling, and I said the same thing to Jess Sharman, and really hyping up the radio voice when she was down there with Willie P in Charlotte. And man, it's so great to reconnect with people like you, Chris. And I made it a point during that episode to highlight just how special Charlotte's radio and TV announcers were. And it was the same thing with Columbus, with Jordan Angeli and Neil Sika, yourself obviously on radio. You had Brett there too. And man, I feel blessed to have made the connections that I had to meet these people in different markets. And yes, we know that it's all behind MLS, but people like yourself that still get the opportunity to do radio, like Dave Leno in Philadelphia. It's great to see you guys still working so hard, still bringing the story and building these connections with the fan base. And so I'm glad to see you still doing your thing, Chris. And I said this to Dave Leno too, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're a IU alumni, correct?
I am. That's right. Dave Leno and I share that in common, among other things.
So. Yes, that is true. And when I saw Dave down in DC for the first game of the season, first thing I said to him was, are you still riding that high from IU winning the national championship? So I ask you the same thing, Chris. I know a few months removed from that, but I got to imagine, I mean, it still has to feel so surreal.
Well, it was a surreal story, and certainly as an alum of the university, and I don't give money to the university or anything like that, not because I have anything against the university, but I'm not that deeply ingrained in the alumni process. But still have some connection to the school and really grateful to have watched the story unfold. I think, Todd, one of the things about that story is that it was it wasn't really organic in the sense that Coach Cignetti kind of knew that he had a good group, but you never really know when you start a season just how good you're going to be in the end. And when those one and done games come up late in the season, and this is true for any squad, you're certainly not focused on the outcome being a trophy in the end. I think Cignetti and the Hoosiers could have wrapped it up in the Rose Bowl. They could have wrapped it up after the first CFP game, but they didn't. And they were able to end the season at number 1. So it was a really special story. It was pure in the sense that the characters were in large part amateur athletes. Yes, I know there's NIL. But, there's something about college basketball, college football that kind of takes our breath away as consumers of professional sports on a regular basis. And that certainly was a story that took our breath away.
Yeah, it was. And so such a cool moment for all the alumni. I think such a cool moment for fans of college football to see a team that maybe wasn't favorites that people seemed to sleep on this season, and yeah, they just kept winning, and won the game that mattered most. But we digress from American football to European football or soccer, whatever you guys want to call it. And what a crazy game for the Columbus Crew on Wednesday night, just like the Philadelphia Union, both in action. Union suffer a heartbreaking draw where it looked like they were going to come away with all 3 points, and Luca Gavrin scores a header. It still blows my mind that a goalkeeper, third time in MLS history, gets a game-tying goal. And I guess that's a story of the Union season so far. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen this season for the Union. But Columbus, I know they had struggled, hadn't won since early April against Atlanta United, and they come out on Wednesday night, beat LA Galaxy 2-1. Former Philadelphia Union playmaker Dániel Gazdag opens the scoring, then Diego Rossi 2 minutes after the start of the second half, and then a late goal conceded from Columbus in that game. But what stood out to you in that game overall, Chris, against LA Galaxy?
Well, before I answer your question, Todd, I'll just go back and on your point about the goalkeeper scoring on Wednesday night. And you mentioned 3 times only in league history has that happened. Will Hesmer, who is the club leader in goalkeeping wins for the Columbus Crew, was one of the other 2 goalkeepers in league history who has scored a goal for his team. With regards to what stood out on Wednesday night, I think there are a lot of things. Obviously, the wide open posture defensively of the LA Galaxy gave Columbus a lot of space within which to work. In doing so, they were able to sort of exploit with their 4-4-2 that they've used over the last couple of weeks, a lot of space on the field, both on the flanks as well as up the middle, and move the ball in a way that they've been moving the ball probably since the second half of Orlando, which was a few weeks ago. It was the game after the Atlanta win. We all thought it was going to be a Sunday afternoon against an Orlando team that had suffered 2 consecutive losses, shutouts, conceding 11 goals in those 2 previous road games, and coming in for a third road game that they probably don't want to play. But they actually got some players back on the back line, as well as Griffin Dorsey on the flank, and they caused some problems for us. So getting out of that game with a draw was kind of a bummer, because we took the first goal lead and then we conceded in the second half. We have been known as a club that is rather giving in terms of late game goals, and this goes back to even the Wilfried Nancy era. So that's a mentality switch that's got to change. We had cleaned it up late in 23, which got us to the MLS Cup, and a little bit in 24 as well. But by late 24, certainly 2025, it was no longer really a hallmark of the way our team played, which was unfortunate. And that's a struggle that most teams go through. So the Galaxy game, I think, presented for Crew fans a very familiar rotation of players within the system that allowed the ball to be moved inside and out, using a rotation of players that included the outside backs, the fullbacks, and the midfielders, who moved in and out of channels and created these opportunities where you could create overloads. LA's Galaxy was keen to that. They did well shifting their defensive shape so that they could match up evenly in a 3v3 or a 4v4 situation on one side of the field or the other. But one of the things that I'm impressed with this year that we've not seen in the Wilfried Nancy era is the fact that Columbus is now switching the ball through the midfield very quickly. It's not 2 and 3 passes, it's 1 and 2 passes. Get to the center, get to the other side, do it efficiently, and now we start the overload on the other side, or we try to beat the player 1v1. I think the other part, dovetailing off of what I just said, is that Coach Rydström is learning more about who he has and where he can use them in this system. And we're starting to see situations where 1v1 matchups on the wing are creating more crossing opportunities because those players on the wing belong on the wing. And then further, the players on the wing are now playing on sides where they're not necessarily inverted. Max Arston's a great example, a U.S. men's national team candidate who certainly wants to be a part of the red, white, and blues effort this year, is trying to prove himself in this 5-week phase where he's away from national team camp, but he knows he has eyeballs on him, and is shifting from left to right. And while he can do the job with both feet, he loves to be able to cut in and shoot. We know Hugo Picard is very natural on the left-hand side, can chip a ball or cross a ball with a left foot, is comfortable shooting with both. So we have players now who are starting to get really comfortable in spots where the head coach is getting comfortable with them in those spots. And as a result, a very well-defined backline that begins with goalkeeper Patrick Schulte, Rudy Camacho, Sean Zawatsky, the captain, Moreira and Multi Amundsen are all regulars in the rotation. We're starting to see some stability from the back to the front, and then creativity comes from that. So it's a long-winded answer, but that's what we're seeing now from the Columbus Crew. And Dániel Gazdag, a former Union man, as you know, and mentioned, wants to be a part of the solution, given that Wessam Abu Ali, our designated player from Denmark, is no longer available because of the torn ACL.
And that's a huge blow too, because he had started to get into fine form with Columbus this season. I believe in the last 5 games he had scored 3 goals, and obviously he's missed the last 2 because out with injury. And such an unfortunate situation for Columbus Crew, where, yeah, I mean, losing a designated player, but losing a striker that's a designated player, a player that's coming into form. Yeah, you hate to see that for any team. And Bradley Cornell makes it a point to say all the time that, yeah, we want to play teams at their strongest. And that's unfortunately not going to happen because Abu Ali done for the season with that ACL injury. I see Jose Nunez has now joined us. Jose, thank you for taking time out of your day. Hope you are all well. And it's been a while, Jose, since you've been on the podcast. So it's a shock to me to see you here.
No, thank you for allowing me to jump late. Work phone calls for what's not my side quest, which is what I call the soccer side of things. When they call, I gotta take it. But Chris, it's so great to see you, unfortunately through a screen, but hear you through these speakers addressing us specifically and not the masses. It's welcome. I appreciate it.
Jose, thank you. It's good to see you as well. Thanks for having me on the show.
I do have a question. I was listening when I finally jumped on, and apologies for being late, to sort of your commentary on Max Auerston. And I hate for this to be sort of a move us away from the topic, but I really wanted to ask this to you. Obviously, you connect with them and chat with the players, et cetera, as you cover the team. Have you ever asked Max, and I don't think it's isolated to just him, but the way, and not necessarily how he feels, but his opinion. It seems like MLS players, when they go and represent the nation, the Stars and Stripes, right? It seems like there's extra, for whatever reason, eyeballs on them, right? In terms of opinion, in terms of criticism, in terms of, the bar immediately, because they play in MLS, the bar gets 10 feet higher compared potentially to other players. Has Max ever talked about what that feels like for him, or what his sense is to all that? Because again, it feels really, and maybe it's elevated because of the World Cup being at home and home soil this year. I'm not sure if Max ever talked about that.
Well, it's a great question, Jose, and I've never asked that question, so that's the answer to your query. But what I would say is that I think a lot of the heat that Major League Soccer players take is artificial in the sense that it comes from social media. It doesn't mean that the opinions aren't authentic. In my opinion, it simply means that people have got opinions who are outside the bubble of the men's national team about players and their credentials. I just watched a cut on social media this morning about Jurgen Klinsmann discussing his, I think, request or whatever his opinion was from MLS players in his time as the head coach of the national team. And keep in mind, the league was very young at that point, that the red, white, and blue players make sure they find a way to Europe in order to be in a competitive environment and to get the training they need so that they can be better representatives when they come back for the men's national team. And then he pulled back on that. He said, all of a sudden, I've got Clint Dempsey coming from Fulham back to the United States. All of a sudden, I've got Michael Bradley playing for Toronto. And he couldn't fight that wave. And the reason why he couldn't fight that wave is because of the money that these guys were going for.
Right.
It's not to say that Fulham was saying, we're not going to pay you anymore, Clint. It was just at that point in his career, he made the decision to come back. He was able to command a pretty solid salary. I think we can all agree that Michael Bradley was equally justified to pull the big salary for Toronto, and they had those golden years up there in Canada. So what Jurgen Klinsmann's point was is that, yeah, I can ask them to go to Europe, but if they've got a bigger paycheck and they have family to care for, or they have obligations they need to be met, I can't fight them on the paycheck. And I think that's one of the strengths that comes from Major League Soccer, is that it does have an infrastructure that does support that. And these players who are at any phase in their career can make a qualified judgment, salary included, on whether they hop back from the European experience to America or remain in America. Specifically to Max Arfsten, there's always been a lot of talk about Max leaving Major League Soccer and going to Europe, and at some point in his career, he's probably going to do that. I can't say it's going to come before, during, or after the World Cup. I would love to see him stay, but I think he's one of those talents that's probably going to find an answer somewhere. Will the money match what the Columbus Crew are willing to pay? That's hard to say. But if the player wants the experience of playing in Europe, the way Aidan Morris did when he went to Middlesbrough, then absolutely, I think that player makes the career choice that he needs to make.
I always crack up a little bit, and then Todd, I swear I will hand the reins over. Because I think of one of the most recent examples, and I think you'll appreciate this too, Chris. But I think where Todd and I excel is that we don't look at the sport in terms of binary terms, right? Whether they're playing here or there when they make decisions, right? And me, as a father of two, of a 6 and a 4-year-old, I also know that I have responsibilities in terms of taking care of and making sure that if I have the opportunity to advance my family, or whatever the case is, that decision gets far more complicated than maybe the lens that people behind social media or behind microphones or whatever sort of take it. But I think of Paxton Aronson, right, coming back to MLS after being away in Europe, and how can you really even be informed enough to make a judgment, right? Like he's young. I'm sure the Colorado Rapids, and I'm pretty sure we have that figure now through the MLSPA, what his salary ultimately was, which I think was closer to $2 million, if I'm correct. Who's going to say no to that as a young player? And you can have some job security, and maybe he appreciates American culture more than being in Europe. To me, it's just really fascinating, the lens that some of these guys go through. And it's sure, it comes with the territory of earning the money that they earn, but it's also really frustrating as someone who tries to educate people and make sure that people who listen and watch the work that we do, that they understand that this is just so, there are so many levels to this. And you and I, but Todd and I will probably never have to make that type of decision. But if we ever had to make that type of decision, I'm sure it's not easy, but certainly many, many factors that go to it.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think what we need to be reminded of as players, and I think you alluded to it, is just the fact that they're normal people like us. In the end, they're playing a sport that we play on Sunday afternoons or on Tuesday nights in an indoor facility.
A beer league,
yeah. But they have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old at home. Amar Sejdic is a great example from the Columbus Crew. He's a midfielder. He's never really been a star. Came out of the University of Maryland, went right to Montreal, had to play with Montreal 2 for a little while, and then was able to break through. But he had that connection with Wilfried Nancy, and he understood what Nancy wanted. He went to Austin for a year. I think he went to Atlanta for a year and a half, and then ended up in Columbus when Wilfried Nancy said, I need to, fill up the midfield a little bit. And Sejdic was a perfect example. Well, Sejdic didn't play a lot under Wilfried Nancy. And we just saw Amar Sejdic start and wear the captain's armband in the Open Cup game against Richmond a couple of weeks ago. He and his wife just welcomed their second child. Just a family that wants to do well in America. Who doesn't? And he has begun to get so much praise from his head coach, Henrik Rydström, because of the effort he puts into training, because of the effort he puts into his opportunities on the match field. I think he's an integral part of what the success looks like for the black and gold. Is he ever going to be a starter with this current group? Probably not, but he's dressing every game. It works all different ways. And if it works for you and your family, terrific. Leave it at that.
Yeah, you had mentioned Sejdic, and so I don't know how many people I would imagine most of the people listening to the podcast are aware, with me being in Maryland. But yeah, that was such a dominant 2018 Terps team with Sejdic being the captain. I mean, my goodness. I mean, Maryland always produces well teams, I feel like, under Coach Sarasco, but that 2018 team was super special with Sejdic playing a big part why Maryland won the national title that season. But
yeah, they had a lot of pros come out of that group.
Yeah, 100%. And I could spend the rest of the episode talking about some of those good Maryland teams, but I don't think our listeners want to hear college soccer. Got to go listen to Matchday Soccer Talk, right, Jose, with Mark Helkenberg. I don't even know if he's still doing that show, but maybe there's an idea. Mark can look at some of the most competitive teams in college soccer over the years. But we had talked about Dániel Gazdag a little bit earlier, Chris. We see all the stick that Gazdag gets maybe from Crew fans, and we know he left Philadelphia Union as the club's all-time leading goal scorer, and we know a lot of those goals came from the penalty spot. But we also know too, I mean, he was vital to the Union's role in 2022, where they made it to MLS Cup and losing to LAFC, and the connection that he had with Mikael Uhre and Julian Kranza playing underneath the set of two. And yeah, it's not been the greatest start of life for Columbus, and I'm sure Dániel Gazdag would say the same thing. 5 goals, 5 assists, and 38 appearances so far for the Crew. Scored his first goal, like I mentioned, against the Galaxy since September 25th against New York City. How would you say Daniel's time in Columbus, from your opinion? I don't care what people on social media are saying. You know, I feel like social media is maybe just a small minority of the local voice and everything. From your opinion, how would you say Dániel Gazdag's done in his time in Columbus?
Well, the first thing I will say is that my impression of Dániel Gazdag, and it may be his Hungarian roots, but he is a man of a lot of gratitude. He loved his time in Philadelphia. He heard a lot from Philadelphia fans after he left last April to come to Columbus. He was making the decision based on what was going on internally within the Union organization, and the Columbus Crew were making a decision based on what was going on in our organization. So good for him that he made the jump. Good for him that he was able to still continue to care for his family. His family moved to Columbus in the summer. I think his son is playing local soccer with Darlington Nagby's children. At least they were last fall. So he got ingrained into the community really well. But Gazdag is that kind of guy, and I don't have to tell you two people that. He's just a wholesome family, community, let's get the job done kind of person. Obviously, it was disappointing when he didn't figure into some of the starting 11 for the games that were coming late in the season last year, but Wilfried Nancy couldn't come up with a solution. And Gazdag, frankly, wasn't coming on as an impact player and creating a demand for more playing time. And I think it was probably the fault of no one's, but maybe the fault of everything that was happening for Gazdag. First of all, Nancy's system is extremely, I won't say complicated, but it takes time to learn it. Gazdag was thrown into the fire right away that week in April when I think he got off the plane on Tuesday for a press conference, and then he was on the plane Friday to go to St. Louis, and he played the second half Friday in a win at St. Louis. So he was thrown in right away. Wilfried said 8-9 weeks later, he said, if I had to do it all over again, I would not have done that to Dániel. I think it was unfair. So now you've got Dániel kind of swimming behind the boat, trying to figure out how to get on the boat. And things, we got a couple goals from him. First one was a penalty kick that Diego Rossi let him take, and then the first goal from the run of play against the Revolution last year. He looked like maybe he was settling in, but then he was dropped from the 11. And then it happened again when Henrik Rydström came in. Henrik Rydström was like, this dude is talented, but I can't find a spot for him. And meanwhile, Rydström is trying to figure out the rest of his personnel and figure out what kind of system he wants to play. And by the way, listening to club leadership, listening to the players, trying not to, for lack of a better phrase, make anyone angry with him in his early days with the club. And Daniel's not getting any playing time. We went 4 consecutive games. There's a $2 million player on the bench who's staying there on the bench for the entire game. And everyone was raising their eyebrows. From a social media standpoint, I think what you saw was a reaction from fans who said, look, we're wasting this money on this guy. Can we find someone who, maybe we can spend the money on who's going to contribute? And we're not winning games commandingly, or at all at some point. Can we figure something out? And then behind closed doors with Henrik Rydström in the media sessions, Rydström could not say enough nice things about Dániel Gazdag and the way he handled things as a professional. That doesn't surprise Todd and José, I'm sure, because he was the consummate professional, contributing during training, trying to figure out where he fit in this new system. We lost Wessam Abu Ali. Now it's a search for solutions. Bring in Dániel Gazdag. We're playing in a 4-4-2. Dániel, can you play alongside Diego Rossi up top? Turns out he can. He got his legs underneath him in that Richmond game in the Open Cup last week. Didn't contribute to scoring, but was all over the field and did well in the build-up. So he controls the ball, gets it, gives it up, gets it, gives it up. But we weren't finding him in the box. We were finding other players. And then the other piece is when we put him alongside Rossi and we put a nice, stout central defense like Taha Habrun and Dylan Chambeau behind him, both of whom are terrific on the ball. Now we can let Gazdag make a few runs. And the understanding that the service is going to come from the flanks, either Hugo Picard, Andres Herrera, or Max Arfsten, means that all Gazdag's got to do is make himself available in and around the 6 in the run of play. And that's what he did the other night to get that first goal. And I got to tell you guys, the thing that was most touching about that goal being scored, and unfortunately it came 2 hours after kickoff was originally scheduled. We did not have many people in the building. But Gazdag was surrounded by 10 field players and hugged in a group after he scored that goal. And it was not because we hadn't scored a lot of goals at home. It was because it was Dániel Gazdag. They celebrated with him, and he was thrilled. He was even keel post-game. I talked to him one-on-one in the locker room. But he knows he hasn't sealed the deal on being part of the solution in the absence of Abu Ali. I'm anxious to see what he can do for a curtain call on Saturday, and hopefully this can become a regular thing for Dániel Gazdag, because I think Dániel, the person, deserves it at this point.
I don't know if it's fair to say this, Chris, and someone who is connected, has been connected, sources in and out of the building. I feel like often I've heard that Dániel the person is even better than Dániel the player in terms of skill and the magnitude of, the type of person he is versus the level of player that he is, which again speaks volumes. And it's great to hear from you and what you've heard and seen. But it's fascinating that one person's misfortune might be the saving grace of a player, and potentially even, the career of a player, when you think about the injury and now the opportunity that 2-3 weeks ago was nothing but like a glimmer of maybe hope that something would go right for Dániel. Because I feel and I'm fortunate enough that I get to watch many games because of covering MLS for the league itself, for the website, and having assignments and having to focus on Columbus games, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I feel that I've seen, unfortunately for Dániel, more mishaps than things go right in terms of opportunities where glancing headers that he just doesn't connect with, balls that come into the box from Diego Rossi, who Dániel goes on and skies over or just somehow gets it all wrong. So for me to have seen the goal that he scored this weekend, which is felt like a true number 9 goal in terms of just tapping with the outside of his foot on a glancing to the near post run to the post, was really encouraging. I'd be intrigued to hear from him how he feels about this opportunity, because I must admit, from reading and certainly I want to give credit to her. Brianna McKay, I believe is her name, from the Dispatch.
Correct.
Did an incredible job summarizing and distilling the press conference when he was introduced to Columbus. And some of the quotes that came from him and from Issa Tall were really interesting in terms of, I feel like we got a bargain. I can't believe that we only got him for $4 million. Like, I had to double check with the agent, I think was more or less the quote that came out of there. So obviously putting all of that into a pocket of time and thinking, wow, I think Todd and I were in the same mindset in a way, where playing under Wilfred with the players that he's going to be surrounded with, Dániel Gazdag should be scoring 10, 15 goals a game. Never mind, sort of 5 or 6 from the penalty spot if Diego wants to give them up. But of course, that hasn't happened. I would love to hear his perspective on this opportunity that he has. And my guess is that he would just be the same humble Dániel that he was in Philadelphia about the very same opportunity, and probably say, I'd rather have Wes, to be honest with you. That's where I would go.
He did say that in the post game following the win against the Galaxy and his first goal of 2026, he did say that the last few months have not been the best for him.
Sure.
I thought it was a very genuine comment. He actually felt a bit sad when he said it. It wasn't anything he would brag about, but he also said, I just had to pull myself up by my bootstraps, and that's my words, not his, but I had to be with it. I had to be with it. I can't say if he was knocking on general manager Issa Tall's door at any point during that time, but I think when you have a player like that who has connection to community and has connection to leadership, as a great leader like Issa Tall is, like the technical director Mark Nichols is, and as Henrik Rydström impresses me as being, I think those guys are probably knocking on Daniel's door and say, Dániel, I know this isn't right. I know it doesn't feel like your career in Philadelphia right now, but you got to stay with us and keep working it. And that's what he did. And he reaped the rewards on Saturday night. I'm extremely happy for him. Wednesday night, sorry.
No worries. I can't tell you, and Todd can also attest to this and probably has some himself, but the number of balls kicked at us by Daniel's kids in the press area that we get after the matches, because those two little guys are just, well, one, the older one for sure, but I saw the younger one just on social media, and I thought to myself, my God, he's getting big, and I should know better. I have my own that are just, growing every time they go out on the sun. But the number of balls that we had kicked to the back of our legs, because they're just nonstop. And Dániel was always, gracious and said, I'm so sorry, please. Like, I'm so sorry my kid kicked that at you. It's like, no, dude, you're in the middle of an interview. Don't stop.
That's great.
Unfortunately, I think I was megged once or twice by I definitely wasn't the only one, but yes, I was unfortunately the recipient of Danny Jr.'s famous nutmegs in that locker room. But yeah, you had mentioned Henrik Rydström, the impact playing faster through the midfield, Chris. 12 goals, 13 conceded, 2-2-1 in the last 5 games, 9 points total in MLS. Completely different system, I would say. And granted, I mean, Jose and I don't cover the Columbus Crew like you call the matches, like we cover Philadelphia Union. But from what I can see on the outside, this is definitely a completely different system, style of play from Wilfred Nancy. And you talked about how, it's going to take some time to adjust and everything. You go from a big change where these players that were brought in for Wilfred to fit his style of play. You bring in a manager that may keep some similar ideas, but he's his own manager. He's going to have his style of play, his tactics, how he wants to play. How would you assess his first 9-10 games this season with Columbus?
Well, Todd, I think the first thing that I would do, because I hear this word used a lot in my training as a coach, the word system refers generally to a 4-4-2, a 3-5-2, whatever it looks like. Is it wing backs? Is it 3 center backs? Are you playing with fullbacks? So yeah, the system right now has settled into something different than what we saw with Wilfried Nancy. We're playing with 4 in the back, and those 2 fullbacks have got full permission to get forward as far as they possibly can, as long as they've got cover underneath and they track back in their recovery runs as quickly as they possibly can. As a result, because we started the season with 3 center backs, we have seen fewer moments where we are leaking chances to the opponent, and that's a good thing. Side by side, Rudy Camacho and Sean Zawadzki have been terrific. With regards to the principles of play, one of the things we knew about Henrik Rydström is that he enjoyed the overloads, and mostly he wants to put players in the box and create chaos for the defending team. We didn't see a lot of that from Wilfried Nancy. You guys may recall that during the course of time, opponents started to learn that they could go ahead and build the igloo, do a low block 5, maybe put 3 guys in front of that low block, and just play 90 minutes against Columbus, and the crew would never figure out how to break through your final 8. Well, we're not seeing that from this team. We're not seeing the tendencies from opponents in handling us that way. We're seeing opponents wanting to get out there and be a part of the overload on one side. All right, you're going to put 4 guys on the left-hand side. We're going to send 4 defenders out there to you. And when they do that in Henrik Rydström's system, especially if he's dealing with a team that can't deal with that pressure, Columbus is ever able to break through those moments. And then, as I mentioned, quickly switch and go to the other side and either counter on the other side or go ahead and create an overload over there. The reason why Columbus is so good in those tight moments is because of Wilfried Nancy and the way he drilled this team. That's the benefit that Henrik Rydström is enjoying right now, is that these guys can handle tight spaces without a problem. The challenge for Henrik Rydström is how do we get from there to putting bodies in the box and creating problems for the opposing team? And we're starting to see inklings of that when we get the ball outside and we know a cross is coming. Where are the runs? Where are the available players? Diego Rossi, playing underneath Wessam Abu Ali, realized that the free space was at the top of the 18 because Abu Ali was dragging center backs into the 6. Now that Diego Rossi is playing a little more forward, Dániel Gazdag is starting to figure out where those gaps are. When Rossi doesn't make the deep run into the 6, the gap is there inside the 18, and it's there for Dániel Gazdag to make the proper run like he did against the Galaxy. So I think that chemistry is going to continue to evolve. But I think the principles of play that Rydström has brought to the table are actually beneficiaries of some of the ways in which this team has been prepared over the last 3 years. For the last year and a half, we haven't had a striker like Cucho Hernandez. You can't go out and buy, if you're in Major League Soccer, you can't go out and buy cheaply Cucho Hernandez 2025. You just can't. And so, we have to find the next guy up. And it just so happens that Dániel Gazdag might be that guy. He just has to be trained a little bit more in the fact that he's no longer running underneath any of those Union players he played with. He's now free to move a little closer to goal. So we'll see how it turns out. One of the things we did see on Wednesday night that we've not seen a lot of is a lot of shots from outside the box. J.C. Marcinkowski is a good goalkeeper for Los Angeles. He's not that big, but it takes a lot to beat him from distance. I don't know if the tape said go ahead, the scouting report said go ahead and take shots from distance on Marcinkowski or not, but we saw a lot of shots from distance. One of the things you do with those shots from distance is you create questions for the goalkeeper. Now the goalkeeper has to be prepared when you're 30 yards out from goal, and then he's got to make sure no one collapses in the wrong spot when you're penetrating inside the 18. So I like that approach, and I think that's just one of the many ways that Rydström wants to see this team create the chaos in the box to turn plays into, or entries, I should say, into goals.
Go ahead, Jose, unless you want me to keep going.
I'm on mute. I had to look it up because something that you mentioned with Rydström sort of brought something up. I feel that the toughest part of his job in joining the league and joining the Columbus Crew wasn't so much to keep up with the production in terms of wins and play style, etc. But I feel like the toughest part of his job is to succeed Wilfred Nancy in terms of the person that he was and sort of the respect that he commanded across obviously the league and across the sport. I would think that it's a monumental task to try to be the replacement and try to be better than someone like him. I think that Todd and I see this now and on the player side. And I guess we saw it too with Bradley Cornell, though his first year he went on and won the Supporter Shield. But I guess a more recent example would be, can't replace a Kai Wagner, right? You can't replace a player like that of that magnitude. Sure, playing style, but certainly what he was as a character. I'm guessing it's probably the same for Rydström, and I guess I sense that has been probably in the back of his head. The times I've talked to him, again covering for MLS, he's always very amicable, always really great in explaining what he's feeling, what his players are feeling. And when they finally got their first win and Abu Ali, I believe, had the brace, including that incredible shot from outside the 18, Max Arfsten had that assist, if I recall, as well, against Atlanta on that Saturday match. I remember asking him, what does this do for you? Not so much in terms of the table, but between your shoulders as an organization. And he gave a great quote where like, I'm just so happy for the guys,
Yeah.
I guess all that to say that I wonder the type of pressure that he feels having to be the next Wilfred Nancy and then some. I would think it's not easy.
Yeah. I will just say, you mentioned you're the father of a 6 and a 4-year-old. You don't want your 4-year-old to grow up to be like your 6-year-old. You want your 4-year-old to grow up and be their own person.
Sure.
And so I think the same thing can be said in the succession of coaches that we've endured here. I know Wilfried Nancy delivered to this club tenfold what was probably expected in the first year and a half that he was here as head coach of the Columbus Crew. But very few people talk about what happened in the second year and a half. In particular, what happened in the last year. We lost in a 3-game series. Now, it had been a long season, but we finished second in the league on points in 2024. But we couldn't get past the Red Bulls, a 7 seed in the playoffs, as a number 2 seed in the East. In fact, we were shut out at home, which hadn't happened in forever, on the first game of that 3-game series. So there were starting to be some signs. You have a full off season to make some decisions. Cucho leaves. Christian Ramirez leaves at the start of 25. I was all in on the roster because I felt like the team could still get through some things, and they did. They extended their away undefeated streak, now second longest in the league history, until they met Miami and lost 1-0 in front of 60,000 fans in Cleveland on that Saturday afternoon. So at that point, it was really necessary for the roster to start to undergo some changes, or at least the approach, because we stopped scoring goals. We started to leak late in the game, and it appeared as though we didn't have any answers. You can spin the numbers any way you want, but we were not the monster that we were in late 23, early 24 at that point. And it was time for a change, whether it had to do with the roster or it had to do with, not necessarily the coach, but there were some really important changes that had to take place, and they didn't. So when you talk about replacing Wilfried Nancy and if I can summarize, not being the guy that comes after the guy, I think Henrik Rydström wanted to take this job, and he wanted to pay homage to Wilfried's impact, but then certainly become his own man in the process. And I think it was the Atlanta game where he finally became a little bit more his own man. He had 2 weeks in the international break, and he said, you know what? I've listened to everybody, and now I'm going to do a few things that no one's brought up because I'm the one thinking it, and I'm the one coaching the team. So he goes to the 4 in the back. Things start to look good. We get the win. Now we're coming forward. Didn't look good against Orlando in one of those in that first half. Second half was a little bit better. This LA Galaxy game was a good one, but it's got to continue. And the schedule's being favorable. No offense to Philadelphia, but Philly's trying to find their own way in this season. And I think Columbus has got an opportunity that they probably should capitalize on Saturday night. If they don't, we'll be back to asking more questions on Monday morning.
So you just willed into existence a draw. Well done, Chris.
Thank you, Jose. Great summary.
I mean, it would be typical for the Union, right? I mean, we talked about at the beginning of the show, Jose, and talked about it last night for sure. I mean, Union moments away from getting 3 points in Toronto, and I would say probably stealing points because Toronto had so many missed opportunities in that match, and they had a goal taken away for offsides with Daniel Shallowy. And yeah, just had to be a goalkeeper goal for the Philadelphia Union. But yeah, I mean, to Bradley Cornell's credit, to the players' credit, they've experienced a moment like that, Jose, last year in Vancouver getting whooped 7-0. And then you go to Nashville and you lose 3-1, I believe it was, in the US Open Cup, and now you're out of Open Cup. And so you hope this match against Columbus doesn't turn into, okay, two losses, or yeah, I know it was a draw, but 2 moments where you could just sink, where that Vancouver game, I think it did have an effect on the players, Jose. They had not given up that many goals at all that season. They didn't do it again, but they didn't look great against Nashville the last couple of days after Vancouver. And so you hope that doesn't happen against Columbus. There's a lot of positives to take away from what we've seen the last couple of games under Bradley Cornell and with the players. And yes, I know you draw against DC United 0-0, but I'm seeing enough in the attack that it brings a lot of promise to me. And yeah, I hope we get goals. I hope we don't get a draw. And I don't know how this game is going to go, but we know the Union have struggled playing in Ohio against Columbus. And does that happen once again? We shall see. I do want to play one clip real quick. Bradley Cornell talking about the Union's road form since he's been the head coach, and kind of the game plan coming in against the Columbus Crew. And I swear I didn't plan it this way, but the Union had sent out the press conference for 10:45 with Bradley Cornell. We didn't find out until I think yesterday. And then I was like, well, we already had the podcast scheduled with Chris. So I was like, this works out that we have something to play from Bradley Cornell's press conference. So this is Bradley on the road form the last 2 games with results against Montreal and Toronto. And then, yeah, the team winning 8 games the last season on the road.
Yeah, listen, I think teams on at home have to play their way, please their fans, and we just have a job to do of disrupting that. And I think that's our nature. It's who we are, and I'm proud of those guys. And listen, road form a year ago doesn't really mean anything now. It's a different team. It's a different phase. It's a different momentum that we have right now. So, we're fighting for every point. We're fighting for every win. We're fighting for everything. It's a really tough. And these are the beauty things that we go through as a coach and or as a team. We'll never sign up for things that are always just easy. And I do believe that, we are right meant to be where we are, because it's just, if we all signed up for this job, I'm sure everyone would want to do the job that we're doing right now, and only experience the highs. And we know that's not life in any ways, in any shape or form. And we all have difficulties or struggle at some point. So, no one's immune to that. And this is the beauty of it, to get through these adversity to get through this adversity and go through these moments. I think it's a natural progression for a player, a coach, a club. It's how you come out of it swinging.
And so Bradley Cornell talking about there how they just want to play their game and expect Columbus to come out and play their game and just make life difficult for them. We saw it against Toronto with the press. Dalen John Jock was at the forefront of that for the Union Wednesday night. But as you called this game, Chris, on Saturday, what's the key matchup you're looking forward to in this match?
Well, before I get into that, I'll just go ahead and mention that Alejandro Bedoya played against Henrik Rydström in Sweden for a short period of time.
Cool.
And the two saw one another yesterday in downtown Columbus as the team was arriving, and coach was going out to dinner with a couple of friends. So they were able to reconnect. Has a lot of respect for Bedoya, has a lot of respect for Philadelphia, and respects as well the approach that I think Philly does take with their press and how organized they are. We don't talk a lot about the opponent at this point with the Columbus Crew, and in large part it's because we've spent a considerable amount of time this season trying to find our own identity. So it's really about having our ducks in a row, and executing. And I think Coach Cornell went ahead and referred to that, that he understands that home teams have an obligation. And I do believe that this squad that has been very good at home, having lost only 9 games in all competitions over the last 3.5 years, is intent on fulfilling that obligation to the home crowd, and hopefully a full house on Saturday night, because we certainly didn't have it after a 2-hour severe weather delay on Wednesday. But it will be great, and shout out to our supporters who stuck around for that entire duration there. But I think this team, what I'm expecting to watch is, can we, in spite of the press, in spite of how good defensively Philadelphia is, can this team still continue to find the spaces, beat the press, find the spaces, and get forward and create the chances they need to create, especially at home in front of the home crowd?
Jose, if you want the last question, it's all yours.
I want to ask about something not related to the match. So if you have something else about the match, I'd love to ask after you.
I'm good.
Okay, Chris, I want to flip the page to talk about the World Cup. I'm really intrigued about the different cities that are helping host nations that are competing in the tournament. Obviously, I'm not from Ecuador, but I appreciate that Ecuador is going to be in Columbus with you all. And having just been in Philadelphia yesterday, and that's the reason I was out late last night, and probably why I look the way I look. I'm really intrigued about the way that the cities that, sure, Philly's hosting games, but how cities are preparing and feeling towards the tournament, which is just 47 days away, I believe, if not a little bit less in certain places, or I guess a little bit longer in certain places. How are you all feeling about the tournament? Obviously, watch parties. Is the community ready? What's the vibe out there for the tournament? Obviously, I would have thought once in a lifetime, but to see the World Cup come to the U.S. twice within the time that I've been alive, it's a really, really cool thing.
Yeah, it's exciting. And as a reminder, there was no Major League Soccer in '94 when the U.S. hosted the World Cup. It was only 2 years later that we saw the league take the field in true matches. But it was a contingency on us hosting the World Cup. It was part of the deal with FIFA that we would establish a top-tier men's league, and to see it flourish over the 31 years to get to where we are today, I think for an old guy like me is really gratifying. You mentioned host cities. For facilities, or I should say for cities like ours, we have Ohio Stadium. We can seat 100,000 people in there, but that truly is a football stadium. And may not have the desire to be one of those host facilities. We can make good, as we did when we extended the invitation to any team who wants to call Columbus their home base during the World Cup, and we got Ecuador. Now, Issa Tall, our general manager, has worked for FIFA. He was a part of the assignment process for Qatar back in 2022, and had even worked with FIFA on host cities for teams visiting World Cup countries prior to that. So he understood what teams needed. He also understood what FIFA demanded, and he became our front runner when it came time to put the package together for Columbus. One of the reasons why teams love Columbus is because the downtown area, the game stadium, and the airport are all within minutes of one another, and they're all a part of the interstate system. So that's really attractive. Ecuador was, I think, probably flabbergasted by the opportunity, not just in the fact that they would have world-class facilities at Ohio Health Performance Center available to them, but they'd have the support of a community. And we're not known for an Ecuadorian immigration base, but we are known for our soccer, as you well know, for the men's national team, the women's national team, and now just getting awarded the 18th franchise in the NWSL. So we have the facilities, we have the infrastructure. They're going to have access to the entire operation at Ohio Health Performance Center when Ecuador's in town. We'll do a community day where fans can come out and take in a training session. We will have plenty of room for VIPs who will travel as a part of the entourage with Ecuador, who aren't necessarily directly involved with the team. And then beyond that, we've got the friendly on June 4th, a Sunday afternoon matchup with Guatemala, who unfortunately did not qualify. And that'll be at Scott's Miracle Grove Field. And that'll be the send-off match, because the following week, the tournament kicks off, and it's going to be all serious business from there on out. So we're thrilled not just to honor the men's national team with some of the players on the crew roster, hopefully, and watch parties in communities all around the Columbus area for the men's national team of the United States. But we're also thrilled to be hosting Ecuador and to continue to spotlight our city for a country and for their fan base, knowing that we'll be a safe spot to launch their 2026 World Cup campaign.
You've been part of this, meaning the sport, and certainly observer of the league before it even really started, right? You mentioning, 94, there wasn't a league. 2 years later, it comes together with the legacy teams that you see across the league now.
Yeah.
I originally was going to ask, and I guess maybe the question would have been differently had the little Argentine not extended his contract through 2028. My original question was going to be, what do you think the league looks like after 2026, after the World Cup? But the reality is, what do you imagine that the league looks like after the World Cup and after, say, Messi decides 2028's it? In highest hopes, what does this league look like?
That's a really great question. We were actually talking about that today during the crew media session, just freely amongst the media people. I feel like the ownership group down in Miami is really committed long term. I don't see them giving up on the accelerator pedal being on the floor. Do they continue down this Argentine path? Do they continue with the influence of Latin America? I think they should, because that's the population of Miami. Excuse me.
No, of course.
So they're in the best spot, really. And with that stadium, it's just tremendous. So, I'm encouraged by what that ownership group has done. Boy, I'm sorry about that.
No, you're okay.
And what they can do as we continue to go forward. So, thumbs up to the ownership group. And, Lionel Messi has just been a real treat for all of us in the league.
Yeah, he sure has. And Todd, I don't know if you even given it a whole lot of thought onto what this looks like after the World Cup, and certainly after Messi goes. Not that it has to be as Argentine as it is, and not that that's right or wrong, but I'm just unbelievably intrigued onto obviously the commercial power of this league since certainly 96. But this league is no longer, I don't think, the retirement league, right? I feel like every time I hear players that move on from MLS to Europe or elsewhere, the way it's often described, it's just a lot of young guys who are using it as a stepping stone, which is okay. And that's honestly, I think, a great thing. It's a come in your prime, come and grind your teeth, and then go on somewhere else. That's okay with me, because I just enjoy watching, and I guess sort of being part of the process too.
Yeah, and like we say all the time on the show, it's nothing wrong with being a selling league. Most of the leagues around the world, most of the teams around the world are selling teams and leagues, and it's just the world of soccer business. And so for players, young players, to look at MLS now as a respectable league and say, hey, look, my ultimate goal is to get to South America, to get to Europe. I'll use MLS as springboard that. I don't think that's a bad thing for the league, and I think that's something that the league should totally go all in on. And I'm sure all of us want to see loosen roster rules, especially for teams that have an ownership group that has money to spend. But yeah, it's a conversation for another day. Really happy with where MLS is. Really happy to see the city of Columbus just embracing soccer as hard as they had. Like you mentioned, Chris, getting the 18th team in NWSL. And I don't know if you were in Columbus, or have you been to Columbus before, Jose? But yeah, I was there 2 years ago for a crew game, and by far best stadium in MLS. I know it's Scott Miracle Grove Stadium now, by far. I mean, they've done the stadium completely right. Beautiful stadium. As soon as you walk in to go up to the press and everything, you see the trophies on display from Columbus. Press box area is fantastic. Fantastic PR department. And I did see Chris when I was there, but he was just going back and forth in the hallways. I'm like, I don't want to bother him, but Chris, it's
Well,
been
you need to stop me next time, Todd. I'm sorry about that.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah.
I talked to Dave Leno for a while, and I was like, yeah, I don't want to bother Chris. I don't want to bother him. Just let him go back and forth between the radio booth and the little hallway to the press area. But Chris, it's been too long, and I'm so glad to finally get you back onto the show.
Yeah, guys, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. Lots of luck to Philadelphia for the rest of the season. The Eastern Conference has a little bit of work to do to keep up with the Western Conference right now, but I think we're in good shape, and so I hope Philadelphia is part of that picture in the end as well.
Yeah, for sure. And with the game being in Columbus this week, and I know we hear fans say all the time, they would love to have the option to have the away feed on the Apple broadcast, but you guys get an opportunity to listen to Chris call the game. So where can fans listen to you if they don't have Apple TV, which I'm assuming most people have Apple TV, or if they want to follow you on social media, Chris?
Yeah, we're on iHeartRadio for the games, and then you can check iHeartRadio out for the Inside the Crew program that I record every week. When we don't have games on Wednesday night, it airs on iHeartRadio live on Wednesdays, and then it's the podcast version the next day. And you can follow me on X. I was going to call it Twitter. Jeez, oh Pete, I love Twitter. I like the name Twitter better than X. But follow me on those. Instagram scares the daylights out of me, so I stay off that as much as I can.
I don't blame you, Chris. But if you guys aren't following the podcast on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, follow at Free Kick Pod, wherever you get your podcast of the Free Kick. Check out the YouTube channel, youtube.com/freekickpod, live every single podcast. And I'll have a goals breakdown video out from the Toronto game sometime today. And if you guys want to check out the podcast, writing, or goals breakdown video all in one place, thefreekick.substack.com. Jose, anything you want to plug before we end it? Any assignments from us?
No, not much. I know I'm working through the transcribing and I guess interpreting something that we're working on. 45 minutes worth of transcribing from Spanish to English is not as easy as anybody can imagine. So that's what I'm working on. And MLS assignment this weekend, I will be on the 7:30 window as well. I think as one of the later games as well. No rain delays, Chris. Please, no rain delays. There's
Thank you, Jose.
7:30 game, and then suddenly it starts at 9-10 o'clock. I gotta go to bed.
All right, I'm with you, brother.
Yeah, but we'll be back Sunday for a match recap of Columbus Crew Philadelphia Union. But with that said, my name is Todd.